I knew that Idaho had potatoes. I knew the Smurf turf.
State horse?
State horse is the Appaloosa.
The Appaloosa?
Good one. Did you know that we have a state vegetable?
The state vegetable, would it be the sugar beet?
No. The potato.
The potato? I thought it would have been obvious.
Well, it might not be obvious. If I told you Idaho has a long history and connection to the U.S. Navy, you might be wondering, how's that possible? Are we a landlocked state? What big boats besides those cargo ships in Lewiston ever see the state of Idaho? Well, Idaho carries a lot of weight for that branch of the military, mostly because of our nuclear facility and a very deep lake up in the Panhandle. But the name is also a well-known entity. You may have noticed the logo on those Submariner shirts, members of the crew of the USS Idaho. We spoke with them nearly 3 years ago, asking them, well, what they knew about their namesake. U.S. Navy's newest Virginia-class submarine, that's a nuclear-powered submarine, will be formally christened and named the USS Idaho this weekend in Connecticut. But this won't be the first time that's happened. 4 naval vessels have carried the name Idaho going back more than a century and a half. The Gem State's initial tour in the U.S. Navy began before Idaho even became a state in the Union. The USS Idaho, named for the territory created in 1863, was a wooden steam sloop. Commissioned on April 2, 1866, it set to sea under Captain John Warden, who oversaw a mostly foreign-born crew. However, at first, the Navy didn't want the Idaho. She wasn't fast enough. But when they added the sails, she was able to let loose. In fact, on a passage to Japan in 1868, the Idaho reached speeds of more than 18 knots, making her one of the fastest sailing ships of her day. But on the trip back across the Pacific in 1869, her sails and hull were damaged by a typhoon. The USS Idaho remained in Japan until she was decommissioned in 1873. Another 35 years would pass before Idaho's brand would bridge the broadside of a boat, this time as a Mississippi-class battleship. Now a full-fledged state, this USS Idaho was commissioned on April 1, 1908, with Captain James Meredith Helm, at the helm. She would spend some time in Central America, England, and France before being sold to Greece in 1914. The third USS Idaho, a little less of a charming life. She was a wooden motorboat, assigned to patrol the Philly and Jersey shores. That Idaho would last only a year, from 1917 to 1918. By that time, the world was at war, and Idaho would once again be assigned to a battleship. The New Mexico-class craft was commissioned in 1919 in New Jersey. Originally part of the Pacific Fleet, the fourth USS Idaho actually spent time at Pearl Harbor in 1940. But she was in Iceland on that fateful day in December 1941. The largest battleship on the water at the time, the USS Idaho headed to the Pacific 2 days later. Her service during World War II would earn her 7 battle stars.
The USS Idaho played a very key role in World War II, was at the Battle of Iwo Jima and provided fire support and was part of the success of the Battle of Iwo Jima.
In April of 1945, she was assigned to a bombardment station off Okinawa, also providing major fire support for that invasion. Then later that year, in September, the crew of the USS Idaho celebrated the surrender of Japan in Tokyo Bay while listening to the band on the fantail. That moment commemorated on the back of that picture. The rockets and searchlights were used for other reasons that night, the night that we received the news that the war had ended. The fourth USS Idaho was decommissioned on July 3, 1946.
Unfortunately, there has not been a ship named Idaho since then, which is kind of sad in some way because Idaho has such a rich Navy tradition.
Well, that changes very soon. There are other Idaho connections to the U.S. Navy, and we're going to talk about those over the next several days. But coming up this weekend, the christening of the USS Idaho. There are 5 major steps for ships to become part of the naval fleet, and it takes years. The first would be the naming, which happened in 2015. The second, the keel-laying ceremony, marking the beginning of the construction of the vessel. That happened in August of 2020. The third, that's the christening. That's this Saturday in Connecticut. Then it's going to be followed by a year of sea trials to make sure USS Idaho floats. And then there's going to be a commissioning ceremony to officially enter the USS Idaho into the Navy fleet. And we're going to have a crew in Connecticut. That'd be Andrew Bartline and Kevin Esslinger. They're going to be there to cover that christening beginning on Friday.